This is the story of James, a hunter whose kindness to a trapped serpent brings a golden egg that restores his wife's health and their fortunes. But when Chief Victor's greed leads him to steal it, a supernatural reckoning unfolds, teaching a lesson in gratitude over gold. What happens when you take what the forest claims as its own? In the wide, sunlit land of Africa, where the earth stretched out in dusty plains, and the sky burned bright with golden light, there was a village called Ntoni, tucked between green hills and a thick, shadowy forest that whispered with secrets. The people of Ntoni lived simple lives, waking early to tend their small farms or hunt in the wildlands nearby. And though they worked hard under the hot sun, the rains did not always come, and the animals of the forest often took more than they gave. The huts of the village were made of mud and straw, their roofs patched with leaves, and in the center was a dusty square where children played and old men sat telling stories, while women carried water from the river in clay pots. Among these people was James, a hunter who had spent his years tracking game with a bow and arrows, and though he was growing old now, with gray in his hair and lines on his face, he still walked tall and carried his quiver with pride. He lived in a small hut at the edge of Ntoni with his wife Mary, who had been his joy since the day they married long ago. But now she lay weak and sick on a mat inside, her body tired from a fever that would not leave her no matter how many herbs the healers tried. Every morning, before the first light touched the hills, James would rise from his mat, touch Mary's cool forehead with a gentle hand, and take up his bow, which was old and worn from years of use, and his arrows, which were few because wood was scarce and he could not make more. He would walk into the forest, his feet silent on the dry earth, and look for birds or antelope or anything he could bring back to sell at the market. And though he tried hard, the forest was not always kind, and many days he came home with empty hands, his heart heavy with worry for Mary. The people of Ntoni knew James well, for he was a man who never turned away from those in need, and even when he had little, he shared what he could with his neighbors. One day, as he checked his traps near the village, a young boy named Samuel ran up to him, his bare feet kicking up dust, and said, "James, my mother's goat ran off into the bushes, and we don't know where it went, and she's crying because it's all we have left." James put down his bow, smiled at the boy, and said, "Don't worry, Samuel. I'll find it for you, and your mother will have her goat back before the sun goes down." He spent hours searching the thorny scrub until he found the little goat caught in vines. When he brought it back to Samuel's mother, she hugged him and said, "You're a good man, James, and the spirits will see your kindness one day." But life was not easy for James and Mary, and as her sickness grew worse, he felt a deep ache in his chest, for he could not afford the medicines sold by traders who came to Ntoni with their carts full of goods. One hot afternoon, as he walked to the market with a thin bird he had caught after a long hunt, he heard the rumble of wooden wheels and the lowing of oxen, and the villagers stepped aside as a grand cart rolled into the square. In the cart sat Chief Victor, the ruler of Ntoni, a tall man with a hard face and eyes that gleamed like polished stones, and he wore robes stitched with threads of gold and rings that shone on his fingers. Victor was rich and powerful, but he was not loved, for he taxed the people heavily and punished those who could not pay. And his laughter was loud and cruel when he looked at the struggles of others. When he saw James with his small bird, he leaned out of the cart and called, "Look at James, the great hunter, carrying that skinny thing as if it's a prize. And tell me, old man, do you think that will save your dying wife, or make you anything more than a beggar?" James felt anger rise in his throat, but he kept his eyes on the ground, for he knew Victor's guards stood nearby with spears, and he could not risk their wrath. Victor laughed again, a sound that cut through the air, and said, "You're a fool, James, waking every day to fail, and I wonder why you bother when everyone knows you'll never rise above the dirt you sleep on." Then the cart rolled away, leaving James standing in the dust, his hands tight around his bow. But he turned and walked home, for Mary needed him more than his pride did. That night, as the stars came out and the air grew cool, James sat by Mary's side, her hand small and cold in his, and he looked at her pale face, her breathing shallow, and he felt tears sting his eyes. He whispered to the darkness, "Great spirits of the forest, I've tried to live right, and I've asked for nothing for myself. But please, if you hear me, save Mary, for I can't go on without her, and all I want is to see her smile again." Outside, the wind moved through the trees, rustling the leaves, and it seemed to carry his words away into the night, as if the forest itself was listening to his quiet prayer. Mary stirred then, her voice weak, and said, "James, don't be sad, for you've given me everything, and I know you'll find a way." He kissed her hand and said, "Rest now, my love, and I'll keep trying, for you're worth more to me than all the gold in the world." The next morning, James woke with a new strength in his bones, though he did not know why, and he took his bow and arrows and set out into the forest, his steps carrying him farther than he had ever gone before. The sun climbed high, painting the leaves with light, and the air grew thick with the smells of moss and damp earth as he entered the deep part of the forest, where the trees stood tall and close, their branches weaving a roof that blocked out the sky. Birds called from hidden places, and once he saw a monkey swing through the vines, its eyes bright with curiosity. But he kept going, driven by a feeling he could not name. The forest was alive around him, with the hum of insects and the rustle of leaves, and he felt small beneath the ancient trees, their trunks wide and rough with age. He walked for hours, his legs aching, his breath heavy, and he thought, "I must find something today, something big, for Mary's sake, and I won't turn back until I do." Then, as he pushed through a tangle of bushes, he heard a sound that made his heart jump, a low, pained hiss, sharp and clear in the silence. He moved slowly, his hand on his knife, and came to a wide clearing where the ground was soft and the air shimmered with heat. There, under the twisted roots of a giant thick tree, lay a huge serpent, its long body pinned beneath a fallen branch, and its scales were black and glossy, flecked with gold that caught the light. Its eyes were large and golden, like the sun at dusk, and they locked onto James, watching him with a stillness that made his skin prickle. He stepped back, his breath caught in his throat, for he knew serpents could kill with a single bite, and this one was bigger than any he had seen, its body thick and strong even in its trap. But as he looked closer, he saw the pain in its gaze, the way its coils twitched weakly, and he felt a pull in his chest, for he could not leave any creature to suffer, not even one so fierce. James remembered the old tales told by the fireside, how the spirits of the forest sometimes took the shapes of animals to test the hearts of men, and he wondered if this serpent was more than it seemed. He set his bow down, his hand shaking, and said, "I won't hurt you, and I'll try to help, so stay still if you can." The serpent's eyes followed him, calm and steady, as he knelt by the branch and began to cut at it with his knife, the wood tough and stubborn under his blade. Sweat ran down his face, his arms burned with the effort, and the forest seemed to hold its breath, the birds falling silent, the wind dying away. He worked and worked, his knife chipping at the wood, and he thought of Mary, her smile, her voice, and it gave him strength to keep going. At last, the branch broke free with a loud crack, and the serpent slid out, its body uncoiling in a slow, graceful wave until it stood tall, its head as high as James's chest. He stumbled back, ready to run, but the serpent did not strike, and instead, it spoke, its voice deep and smooth, rolling through the air like a drum. "You are brave, hunter, and you are kind, for you freed me when others would have run or raised their weapons, and so I will reward you with a gift." From beneath its scales, it drew out a golden egg, small but heavy, and it shone so bright that James had to squint. And the serpent placed it at his feet and said, "Take this egg, and it will bring you wealth. But listen well to my words, for what is freely given can be freely taken, and you must use it with a good heart, or all will be lost." James stared at the egg, his mind spinning with wonder, and he said, "Thank you, Great One, and I'll remember what you've said, for I only want to help my wife and my people." The serpent nodded, its golden eyes gleaming, and then it turned and glided into the shadows, vanishing among the trees as if it had never been there. James picked up the egg, feeling its warmth against his skin, and he held it close as he made his way back to Antony, his steps lighter now, his heart full of hope. The forest seemed to watch him go, the leaves rustling softly, and he thought he heard a faint hiss on the wind, but he did not look back. When he reached his hut, the sun was low, painting the sky red. Mary was awake, sitting up weakly, her eyes wide with worry. "James, you were gone so long, and I thought something happened to you. But you're here now, and what's that in your hands?" He knelt beside her, his smile wide, and said, "It's a gift, Mary, from a serpent in the forest, and it might help us, so let's see what it can do." He set the egg beside her on the mat, and as they watched, it began to glow, a soft golden light that spread over her like a blanket, and she gasped, her hands reaching out to touch it. The light grew brighter, warm, and gentle, and James saw Mary's face change, the lines of pain smoothing away, her cheeks filling with color, and her breathing grew strong and steady, like it had been years ago. She sat up straighter, her eyes clear, and she said, "James, I feel alive again, and the sickness is gone. And how did this happen?" He laughed, tears running down his face, and said, "It's the egg, my love, and the serpent's magic, and it's healed you, just like I prayed for." Then they looked around, and their hut was no longer empty and bare, for piles of gold coins glittered in the corners, baskets of jewels sparkled on the floor, and rolls of fine cloth lay against the walls, all brought by the egg's power. Mary hugged him tight, her arms strong again, and said, "You've saved me, James, and this is more than I ever dreamed." He held her close and said, "It's for us and for Antony, and I'll use it well, like the serpent told me." The next day the villagers came to see, their voices loud with wonder, and they crowded around the hut, staring at the treasures and at Mary, who stood outside with a smile. Her health returned. An old man named Peter, who leaned on a stick, said, "James, you've been blessed, and we've never seen anything like this. So tell us how it happened." James told them the story of the serpent and the egg, and he said, "This isn't just me, but for all of us, and I want Antony to be strong and happy." He took handfuls of gold and gave them to families whose roofs leaked. He bought goats and chickens for those who had none, and he sent for healers from far villages to care for the sick. And soon, Antony was alive with new hope, the children laughing, the market full of goods, and the people calling James, James the Blessed, a name that spread through the hills. But high on the hill, in a house made of stone and wood, Chief Victor watched it all, his fists clenched, his heart dark with envy. He had ruled Nantoni for years, taking more than he gave, and he liked to see the people bow to him, their heads low. But now they looked to James, their faces bright with love, and it made Victor's blood boil. He sat in his big chair, his robes heavy with gold, and he muttered, "How can a hunter have more than me? And why do they cheer for him when I'm their chief? And I won't let this stand, for I should have it all." He called for Thomas, his advisor, a thin man with a quiet voice, and said, "Thomas, go down to the village and find out where James got this wealth, and don't come back until you know everything." Thomas bowed and said, "Yes, my chief, but I've heard whispers already, and they say it's a gift from a serpent in the forest, given because James was kind." Victor slammed his hand on the table and said, "A serpent? That's a lie, and he must have found a secret treasure, and I'll take it from him, for no one in Antoni should have more than me." Thomas tried to speak again, his eyes nervous, and said, "Be careful, my chief, for the spirits don't like thieves, and this gift might be protected, and you could bring trouble on us all." But Victor waved him away, his laugh sharp, and said, "I'm not afraid of spirits or serpents, and I'll have that wealth, and James will be nothing again. So go and watch him, and tell me what you see." Thomas left, his head low, and Victor sat alone, his mind turning with plans, his greed growing like a fire that would not die. He waited for days, watching from his hill, and he saw how the village changed, how the huts were repaired, how the people sang as they worked, and it made him hate James more, for he wanted their praise for himself. One night, when the moon was hidden by clouds and the village slept under a blanket of stars, Victor took a dark cloak and crept down the hill, his steps silent, his heart pounding with excitement. He came to James's hut, where the door stood open, for James trusted his neighbors and had no fear of thieves. And inside, James and Mary slept on their mats, their faces peaceful in the dim light. On a wooden shelf, the golden egg sat, its glow soft and warm, and Victor's eyes widened, his breath quick as he reached out and took it, the egg heavy in his hands. He ran back to his house, the night hiding him, and he laughed to himself, saying, "Now it's mine, and I'll be richer than ever, and James will see who rules in Tony." But when he got inside and closed the door, the egg grew hot, burning his skin, and he tried to hold it still, his greed stronger than the pain. And then a voice filled the room, deep and angry, saying, "You have stolen what was not yours, and your heart is black with greed, and now you will pay for what you've done." Victor dropped the egg, his hands red, and he shouted, "No, it's mine now, and no one can take it from me." The walls shook, the air grew cold, and from the shadows the serpent came, its body huge, its scales shining, its eyes like fire as it stared at Victor. "Thief," it said, "you broke the law of kindness, and you ignored my warning, and this egg was given to a good man, not a cruel one. So your time is over." Victor fell to his knees, his voice trembling, and said, "Spare me, great one, and I'll give it back, and I'll never steal again." But the serpent hissed, its coils moving fast, and it wrapped around Victor tighter and tighter, until he screamed, and with a flash of light, both the serpent and Victor were gone, leaving the egg alone on the floor, its glow fading away. When the sun rose, James woke to find the egg back in his hut. But it was cold now, its magic gone, and the gold and jewels had vanished, leaving the hut as plain as it had been before. He looked at Mary, who was stirring the fire, her face healthy and bright, and he smiled, for she was still with him, and that was enough. She came to him and said, The riches are gone, James, but I'm here, and we're together, and that's all I need." He took her hand and said, "You're right, Mary, and the egg gave us what mattered most, and I don't care about the gold, for you're my treasure." They stepped outside, and the villagers gathered, their eyes wide as they saw the hut empty again, and Peter asked, "What happened, James, and where's the wealth? And what about the chief?" James told them everything, his voice steady, and he said, "Victor took the egg, and the serpent took him, and the riches are gone, but Mary's well, and that's the true gift. So let's be thankful for what we have." The people nodded, their faces thoughtful, and they saw that James was still the man they loved, not for his wealth, but for his heart. And they whispered about Victor's end, saying the spirits had judged him for his greed. That night, they sat around a fire in the square, and James told the story again, the children listening with big eyes, and he said, "Remember this, little ones, for kindness is the gold that never fades, and gratitude keeps us rich, but greed will take everything and leave you with nothing." The tale of James the Hunter and the golden egg spread through Nontoni and beyond, carried on the wind, and it lived in the hearts of the people, teaching them that what is freely given can be freely taken, but what is built with love and goodness stays forever. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.